time. I think the people who care about this issue care about it a great deal and are very energised and motivated. But the majority of the public, they want good schools, they want good hospitals, they want a strong economy. I think you have to have those core battleground situations in the right place if when you run a campaign.
31 days to go to the election. We'll talk about what the major parties seemingly don't want to talk about, the awkward questions over the likes of migration and social care. Also, why has the frenzy of policy announcements made no difference to the polls? And are stunts the only way of getting attention if your party lacks the limelight?
You can join in by WhatsApping us on 0333 003 2353. You can text 87222, start your message with the word Times, or email us studio@times.radio.
First of all, are you likely to cast your vote on the basis of how sex and gender are defined? Because that's the Conservatives' big theme today. Writing in the Times, Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch says her party would define sex as biological in the eyes of the law. She also accuses sexual predators and activists of abusing equality laws and wants to protect what she calls the privacy and dignity of women and girls. A lack of clarity is the problem, she told us earlier.
The biggest issue we find is that people use sex and gender interchangeably, which they always did in law, but now those two words tend to mean different things. And you find, for instance, a rape crisis centre being unable to exclude on the basis of biological sex because they're worried about being sued, people not really understanding what they should do in terms of building regulations on, public toilets, and so many other areas where you find public authorities thinking that by being that they need to be inclusive, but doing so in a way that is actually exclusive.
Now, we've also been speaking to Labour's John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary, and he disagrees with the Equalities Minister.
Well, she's wrong, isn't she? Sex and gender are different. They're not interchangeable. And she's wrong, I'm afraid, to say that complex legal change is going to sort the problem out. This can be done. We can learn the lessons about what they got wrong in Scotland, but we don't need to do it by primary legislation. And we should do it by guidance and sensible discussion.
Lee Cain, how much of this, I know lots of people who regard this as an important issue, and they would say it's a heart of conservatism. This type of issue needs to be dealt with. How much of this is a genuine attempt to make the world better, do you think? Or how much of it is an electoral ploy, or can it be both and one doesn't negate the other?
I think we're in an election campaign, so everything that all the parties are doing are broadly, politics. And what we're seeing here is the Tories continue the sort of strategy of a base vote policy. They're looking to get that core demographic out. They're worried about the sort of reform element, and they're sort of looking to get that core vote out. It's quite interesting because we can see, with this particular policy, judged on some of the others, a quadruple lock that we've seen, that with the Conservatives now, they're not looking to try and win this election. I think we can see from the polling it's pretty gloomy, but they're looking to sort of minimise losses and try and hold on to as many seats as possible. Are they doing that overtly,
do you think? Do you think someone's sitting in a room with Rishi Sunak and saying, the election's gone, we just don't want to get down to 70 seats. If we can get to, 200 seats, we've done all right. Will they be being that frank, do you think?
I suspect they will be at this point.
Really?
The people in there will be able to read the data. They'll have sat in, as many folks, probably more than I have, and looked at the polling. They will be able to read the tea leaves and see that for the Conservatives, the ground there is very poor. We can look at, the reason that Keir Starmer today is going out talking about defence. He's very much got his tanks on traditional Conservative territory, where the Conservatives are retreating back into what would be core vote strategy. If you compare that to 2019, when we had Boris out in hospitals and we were talking about what we can do for the NHS, more nurses, more doctors, again, which is traditionally Labour sort of heartland, because we knew we were making inroads there. So it was an offensive manoeuvre. So it's definitely all part of a strategy. And at this stage of the game, it's probably the right one for the Conservatives, because the mood of the country is for change. So the idea that they're going to overturn, the MRP, I think we saw on Friday, that left the Conservatives with just 66 seats. That is a sort of Armageddon for the party. I don't think it'll be that bad.
No, Peter Kellner was on saying he thinks that the MRP probably undervalues the Tory vote a little bit.
I think that's probably true. But if you look at the sort of average MRPs that we've seen so far, it's between about 100 and 150 seats for the Conservatives, which, whichever way you cut the cake, that's pretty bad from where we were in 2019.
Sienna, is Keir Starmer as vulnerable on the culture war stuff as he once was? Because it strikes me that we've actually had a Labour, I think Annalise Dodds came on this programme and said Labour's been on a journey with this. And, 2 years ago, they were getting into a mess of what a woman was, and they couldn't really answer that question. They didn't want to answer that question. But it seems that, as with all of these things, he's found the areas where there was a big difference between him and the Tories. And he's actually reduced the difference in lots of ways, because what he wants to say to a whole bunch of Middle England is, don't be scared of voting Labour. We know what a woman is. We know about nuclear deterrence, and we want to back that. We want to have a big army. His strategy to actually, weirdly, considering how unpopular the Tories are, is weirdly to get closer to the Tory position than further away.
Yes, completely. That has been very deliberate. That's what he's done over the years. I mean, compare his position now and what he kind of says on this issue now to what he was saying, 2-3 years ago to Andrew Marr. He was saying, no, you can't say that if someone doesn't have a cervix, that means that they can't be a woman. He's definitely changed his line on this. I think, the Tories with this, they are pursuing that core vote strategy. At the same time, they're throwing down the gauntlet for Labour, aren't they? Like, they're kind of highlighting this because Labour's policy, even now, is still a little bit confusing. I mean, there's kind of John Healey was on earlier, and his comments don't completely ring true, I think. And also, their policy at the moment is that you can change your sex legally if you can do so with the approval of a single GP. And a lot of people on the other side of the argument, the kind of gender critical, anti-trans, whatever argument, would say that's equivalent to self-ID. So I think Labour's position itself is a bit confusing.
But do people care? I'm only listening to this.
But do people care?
Yeah.
That's a key question.
It is a key question.
It's not going to change the outcome of this election, is it? It's not going to change that many votes.
Got a very strange environment where the Conservative Party aren't really trying to win. They're trying to minimise losses. And the Labour Party are just desperately trying not to lose. So, walking around with their sort of Ming bars, desperately trying not to break anything, and are still slightly scarred from elections gone by. So it's quite rational for them at this point. If you don't have to go out and make risky policy announcements that, as we saw with Theresa May, that hold that through. Now, when
at this point, yes, but after.
So when you're in power, I think good governments, good smart governments, where they'll have Keir's going to have a huge amount of political capital. He's going to walk through Downing Street with a huge majority. Now, what he does with that majority, I think, is going to be the telling point. Boris came in and I think predominantly tried to hoard up that political capital, was terrified of spending it on big ticket issues. And over time, what happens there is the political capital slips through your fingers and you get to a point where we are now in an election and the Tories have nothing to say, stick with the plan with, because they haven't delivered what they should have done. Now, Keir's going to have that political capital, and if he's smart, he will spend it on big ticket issues that can really bring change to the country.